ultimate guide here.
Hey
All right.
folks, this is Rhyyker with a class overview video for Diablo 4 to help you pick what
All right.
class to play.
What
The different
class do you
classes
guys
offer different
are
gameplay
you?
experiences, and you want to ensure
What class are you guys going to pick? Please let me know in the chat if you have an idea or if you're undecided, or if you're leaning one way. I think I might do Sorceress just because I've never done a magic, like a Sorcerer magic playthrough with this. I've always done either like Paladin, Assassin, or Rogue, or Demon Hunter, or Amazon. I've never just like done like a straight Sorcerer build. So I might do that, but it always seems like for me like the Sorcerer builds were a little bit too OP. So I just was like, I kind of. It seems like you just do a bunch of damage like on the whole screen, and like I just didn't think that looked very fun, but maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe it's hella fun. So I might do that, but we'll see. I might do the Rogue as well. I haven't really quite decided yet.
that you pick the class that'll be most fun for you. In this video, we'll give an overview of every class, its primary playstyle, some of its key skills and specializations, as well as notable strengths and weaknesses. If you want to skip ahead to specific classes, I'll have timestamps in the description. If you're still on the fence about buying Diablo 4, be sure to check out my review video, and if you did get the game, check out my guide explaining all the new mechanics like Lucky Hit, Fortify, Overpower, and more. Also, turn on subscription notifications to be alerted when new Diablo 4 videos go live. But before I move on, a quick word from this video's sponsor, GNC. GNC is partnering with creators like me in the gaming space. Alright, diving in. Upon its release, Diablo 4 will have 5 classes: the Barbarian, the Druid, the Necromancer, the Rogue, and the Sorcerer. Each class looks different and has its own playstyle. You can customize the appearance and the gender of your character, but the overall look and body type will remain recognizable as your base class. And even the gear you wear and your cosmetic options will represent your class's aesthetic. We'll note as well that Diablo 4 does not have traditional MMO class roles. Every class is DPS. There's no dedicated healer, no dedicated tank. In ARPGs, what we tend to see is support builds emerge, rather.
Yeah, what I think is interesting is like I've never played an MMO until I played FF14, and I legitimately didn't even understand what healer, tank, DPS was. I was like, well, why would you have a class that doesn't do damage as much as another class? Or I'll be like, why? Like, how can your class not heal? I'm like, what the hell? Because like, yeah, like that's just it. It's funny. For some people, it makes so much sense to have like that class system, but really, at the end of the day, there's so many games that just ignore that, and just your character does everything.
Than support classes. We also call these ZDPS or zero DPS builds, and they focus on taking skills that help the rest of their team deal more damage and or survive better. Now, as you go through every class, we'll also talk about ultimates and key passives. Every class eventually unlocks ultimate skills on their skill tree. You don't have to pick an ultimate, and not all builds will use ultimates, because you do have to sacrifice a skill slot to fit in an ultimate into your build. And ultimates generally have very high cooldowns, roughly a minute. If you do pick an ultimate, you can only pick one. Then key passives are the final nodes on your skill tree. Again, you can only pick one, and these are generally so powerful that you will definitely want to pick one, and it can effectively define your build style.
I think what's really cool about like these types of games, like Diablo and a lot of other types of games, but just single player games that have like skill trees like this, is that you can play a barbarian, but you can play in like 12 different ways. You know, you can play a rogue 7 different ways. Whereas like, again, like from my experience with Final Fantasy 14, it's like if you want to play a different playstyle, you just have to choose a different class. Every class is played the same, at least from what I understand. I haven't got to max level yet, but all the way up to level 60, 70, it's like, okay, if you want to play different, you just have to play a different class, job, you know. But it's interesting to think, okay, well, you can be a paladin, but you can build that paladin out to have him just be different, play differently. You know, you can respec your character to have it play differently. I think that's like a level of customization that I think is really fun in these games, because it's like you make your character uniquely, like, you know, you're not just like every other paladin. It's like you make yours different and you know, special, and like how you like to play it, which I think is really cool.
Either you pick the key passive that best fits your build, or you make a build around a key passive. We'll also talk about each class's unique class mechanic. Every class has something special that other classes don't get, which significantly alters how the class feels or plays. So Let's start with the Barbarian. This is your melee tough guy. If you want to be in the thick
Barbarian.
of battle, dishing out and taking tons of damage, this is the class for you. The Barbarian has a lot of big
I've watched all the
melee
no clip
attacks.
Black
There's a lot of
Star.
potential to make bleed-based
I have my
builds,
reactions
which will
on
deliver damage
my
over
clips
time,
channel.
so you can tag an enemy and keep moving while they bleed to death. You got some fan favorite skills like Whirlwind that lets you deal damage while moving. You got defensive skills to buff yourself to stay alive in the midst of all these enemies.
Yeah, so the Whirlwind Barbarian, that's supposed to be one of the best classes. That's what Asmongold's picking, and it looks good.
As well as skills that'll crowd control enemies. You have lots of war cries to buff yourself, buff your allies, nerf enemies, or even taunt enemies to aggro onto you. Basically, the Barbarian is the closest Diablo 4 has to a traditional tank class. And he has a lot of skills to support a team, so I can't imagine support Barbarians will become a thing. The Barbarian also has gap closing skills like Charge and Leap to get into melee faster, or skills that bring enemies to you. The Barbarian has 3 ultimates, which we'll showcase here. Call of the Ancients summons the spirits of 3 powerful Barbarian warriors who join you in battle, increasing your damage output. Wrath of the Berserker makes you go Super Saiyan, and you temporarily gain a damage and a move speed buff, and you become immune to crowd control effects. Those 2 skills return from Diablo 3, but this new one, Iron Maelstrom, is really cool. You pop this 3
What's Snoo Snoo? I don't know. Is that a reference to something?
times in a row. The first time you pop it, it does a big ground slam, stunning enemies. The second time you pop it, it's a big swipe of damage in front of you. This inflicts a bleed.
That looks good.
And then the final hit does a huge swing all around you. The Barbarian has 2 unique class mechanics, the Arsenal system and Weapon Expertise.
So there's a couple different ways. It looks like you played the Barbarian like big AoE crowd control, but then like the one before that, they also had like you do like a lot of the damage to just one thing, which is kind of like it seems like AoE is what you need to do though in Diablo with all the mobs and just everything. It's like you have to do like crowd control. Have you seen Futurama? Yeah, like 15 years ago.
Which tie into one another. The Barbarian is the only class that has 4 weapon slots. One for a 2-handed bludgeoning weapon, one for a 2-handed slashing weapon, and then 2 slots for any combination of 1-handed weapons, which are used for dual-wielding attacks. Different Barbarian skills may require specific weapon types. Some skills let you use any kind of weapon. And with the Arsenal system, you can actually choose to assign specific weapons to specific skills, or you can just let the game automatically pick for you. When you activate a skill, it automatically
Is that when they go to the planet where it's just all like Amazon women?
uses the weapon assigned to it. You don't have to manually weapon swap. Because Barbarians get more item slots than any other class, that means they can stack more legendary properties than any other class. These are game-changing powers. Then the Weapon Expertise system is a progression system where using a specific weapon type gives you experience with that weapon.
Good. Okay, so they have weapon expertise. This is actually cool. I like that a lot.
You can level up each weapon type to level 10, and every level further increases a specific buff.
I love when you get rewarded for like play styles because it's like I don't like that it's just like where you just can spec it and that's it, but it's like you putting the time in to like a certain play style, you get rewarded for it. I think that's a smart thing. I think it's good. It reminds me of like Oblivion. Like Oblivion had that where it's like you just attack with your sword, you get better at it, or you can attack with your fist, you get better at fists. And then when you went to Skyrim, they took that away, and it was like it's just the only way to level that up is just to like put that into your skill slot. And it's like I like the thing of like if you want to get better at something, keep doing it. I like that because you have to put the time in and there's like a trade-off, but it's like, okay, well, I'm going to be the one that's good at the maces. I'm going to be the one that's good at this. And it's like this level of customization where like you really, there's no other character exactly quite like yours. I really like that.
For that weapon type.
At least
for
at
instance,
first.
Two-handed sword expertise makes you deal extra bleed damage on top of your normal damage while using two-handed swords. But then you get to select one of those expertises for your technique slot. And the technique slot lets you gain that buff for all your weapons,
Wow, there's a lot.
not just the weapon type that is assigned to it. So for
I think this is interesting. It's like, for me, I'm like, this is deep and this is good. And for people that play PoE, they're like, this is like surface level like 2-inch pond shit right here. Like, they're like, this is nothing compared to like what, like the level of depth that PoE has. But for someone like me that's more casual to this game, dude, this is great. This is just as deep as it needs to be. I'm the casual person that Diablo is targeting, I guess, right?
For instance, that bleed buff would apply even when you're not wielding a two-handed sword. So you have this sort of mini game where you will be leveling up your weapon types, but also deciding which expertise best fits your build to apply to all your attacks. A barbarian's resource is called Fury. You start off with 0 Fury, and you generate Fury by either using certain skills or by taking damage. Once you're out of combat for a while, your Fury actually degenerates until it reaches 0. Fury management can be more difficult in the early game. You may find yourself needing to pick a few different skills to help with Fury generation. Barbarians have 4 key passives to choose from. Gushing Wounds is for bleed-based builds. Unbridled Rage is just a strict damage buff that can help any build. Unconstrained is for berserk-based builds. This is a buff that the barbarian has a few ways of generating that is basically like the traditional RPG barbarian rage. It's a short buff that increases your damage and your move speed. And then Walking Arsenal encourages you to use all your different weapons.
Berserk seems cool. Are you going to do that one, Black Star? That one seems great.
Your entire arsenal by giving you big buffs for doing so. Overall, barbarians are a little slower to build up in the early game, but they become really strong in the end game. Onto the Druid, the master of nature. The Druid offers a variety of playstyles. You can be a melee shapeshifter, a summoner, a caster, or some hybrid combination of any of these. As a shapeshifter, you can become either an agile werewolf or a tanky werebear. As a caster, you call upon the forces of nature.
I'm not into this stuff. I don't like it when your character turns into like some bear or something. I think that's just dumb. Like, some people are into that stuff, but I'm just like, I'd rather like my character have like a bunch of tools and like weapons and bombs and stuff, or like that's kind of why I lean rogue. But I think I might push myself sorcerer. But yeah, this is not my kind of thing. But I know some people are really into it. I don't know. Does anybody really into druid?
To summon storm spells like lightning and hurricanes, or earth magic like landslides and big old boulders. With your summoner skills, you can call wolves and ravens to your side, as well as poisonous vines that creep around and follow you. As a caster,
I can
you
see
have
the
defensive
appeal.
skills that can give you rock armor or tornado armor.
It's just
and
not
as
my
a
thing.
shapeshifter, you have different animal roars in your were forms to get defensive buffs. Overall, you're a class that focuses on physical, lightning, and poison damage. The Druid has 4 ultimates, which we'll show here. Cataclysm summons a massive storm that follows you, spawning twisters and lightning. Grizzly Rage turns you into an uber werebear for a short time, and killing enemies extends the duration.
Guys.
Lacerate turns you into a werewolf and makes you zip around the screen in a fraction of a second, dishing out 10 hits to enemies in the area. It feels like the 7-sided strike from the monk in Diablo 3, except it's 10-sided slash. Then Petrify is the earth magic ultimate. It encases enemies in stone, stunning them for 3 seconds, and giving you a better chance of landing crits on them. The Druid's class mechanic is Spirit
It actually
Boons.
it seems pretty technical, actually, this character. It seems like it's actually like pretty damn technical. Like, it's not just pure power. It's like you're like summoning things, you're like encasing things in like stone, you're like turning into like different creatures to like get different buffs and stuff. It probably plays pretty decent now that I'm like, I mean, obviously I know like the meme that this one's silly, that it the 17 damage, that it sucks, but that's just, it's still going to be a good class, but it seems like actually more technical than I kind of thought it would be.
Basically, as you defeat enemies,
Harder playstyle, yeah.
Druidic spirit offerings as drops.
I think for those people that want to do druid, I really do think that it'll probably be a pretty rewarding and unique experience. I think it's the least amount of people are going to play druid. So like, I think like to play, if you're playing druid, I think you'll have a perspective that a lot of other people won't have. I kind of like that.
One additional boon on one spirit for a total of 5 boons activated. The buffs for these boons will help shape your build. A druid's resource is called Spirit. It neither passively generates nor degenerates. You need to use generator skills to build it up. And a lot of druid skills are resource heavy, so...
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so this doesn't regenerate or degenerate. It just, you have to do skills to get it back up and back down. So like I said, very, very technical, very like active, you know, with like what you're doing. You can't really just passively like kind of click and wait for your mana to come back up like a sorcerer.
As you build up your character, you'll be looking for ways to better manage your resource, like through spirit builds. The druid's key passives include Bestial Rampage, which buffs your were forms, Earthen Might for earth magic casters that want to focus on the lucky hit mechanic. Again, I have a video explaining what lucky hit means. Lupine Ferocity, which is specifically for werewolf builds. Nature's Fury for caster druids that use both earth and nature magic. Perfect Storm for storm casters. And Ursine Strength for pure werebear builds. Overall, druids struggle in the early game relative to other classes, as they lack mobility and consistent resource generation, but they are a dominant force in the endgame. Next we have the Necromancer, the Master of the Dead. If you want to be a classic summoner or a caster of dark magic, the Necro is for you. Necromancers can cast bone spells.
This class is always really cool, always really powerful, always really good. But there's something that makes me feel I feel weird about having a bunch of different minions, and then I feel like if a game is going to give me a bunch of minions, it's going to somehow nerf like what I just actually do when I'm physically like kind of doing my damage. You know, it has to balance that out. So like it always makes me like it just doesn't seem like the right playstyle for me. That being said, it's probably fucking phenomenal. He's gonna talk about it. They're always really good.
Like summoning and hurling a bone spear, or trapping enemies in a bone prison.
And some people really like
blood
this.
spells, like a blood nova, or transforming into an invulnerable blood mist. They can even get up close and personal, wielding either two-handed scythes or one-handed weapons and shields, and they can hurl shadow magic scythes at enemies from afar. They can also cast curses to inflict upon enemies. And then they have corpse skills. They can transform the bodies of their dead foes into skeletons to join their army.
Yeah, that's it.
Literally explode the corpses to deal damage to other enemies.
Corpse explosion.
Seriously, corpse
really
explosion,
good.
one of the most fun skills in any video game, a staple since Diablo 2. The Necromancer has 3 ultimates, which we'll showcase here. Army of the Dead summons hordes of kamikaze undead that explode onto enemies. Bloodwave reenacts that scene from The Shining and sends a wave of blood at your enemies. And Bone Storm summons a tornado of bones around you to shred your foes. The Necromancer's unique mechanic is the Book of the Dead, which allows you to customize your Army of the Dead. Wait, that's confusing. Not as in Army of the Dead, your ultimate, your skeletal minions. You get 3 minion types: skeletal warriors, skeletal mages, and a golem. Each of the 3 minion types has 3 subtypes that you can choose. For skeletal warriors, you can go full offense warriors, defensive warriors, or special attack warriors. For skeletal mages, you can go with shadow magic mages, cold magic mages that deal less damage but chill enemies, or bone magic mages that deal more damage but are literally pulling out their bones to throw at enemies so their attacks cost them life.
Yeah, the Necromancer I feel like is not my playstyle, because like for me it's like having like all of those different minions, and they're all different, like they're all customizable, they're all different, they all have like a different strategy like around them, but it's like they're also just all over the screen, and it's like you can't control like how like certain matchups of your minions maybe will do well against things. It just seems like it's kind of like a overall you're kind of doing this much damage and you have this much like defense and magic, and it seems like it's just like chaotic for my mind to just be like there's like 8 guys on screen that like are doing my bidding, and I'm like not able to individually see what any of them are doing. Really, they're all just kind of at once doing all of these different things, and for me that seems a little stressful. I don't know, it's probably just fine, like I mean, it's gonna be a good class, but it just doesn't like call to me, I guess is what I'm saying.
And for your golem, you can pick a bone golem that taunts enemies to pull aggro to itself, a blood golem that drains life from enemies to heal and buff itself, or an iron golem that slams the ground to stun enemies. But if you decide, hey,
it's probably
I don't want one of my
though.
skill slots occupied by skeletons or golem, you can choose the 4th option, Sacrifice, which prevents you from being able to spawn this minion type in exchange for a specific buff. Sometimes you may just desire a buff so much that you decide to forego skeletal mages, for instance, or any of the minion types. Now, necromancers do not have direct control over their minions. The minions go out and they do their own thing. You can't direct their attacks. However,
there's too many.
Each golem has a specific special active ability that you'll want to use when appropriate, and skeletons get a button that you'll want to pop to heal them and give them temporary buffs. A necromancer's resource is called essence, which generates naturally over time and can also be generated with basic attacks. On top of this though, necromancers are the only class with a second resource to manage: corpses. When an enemy dies, it leaves behind a corpse. There are other ways that you can generate corpses as well. Some skills, instead of costing essence, consume corpses, like corpse explosion or raising a skeleton. Effective management of both corpses and essence is key to performing your best as a necromancer. Necromancer key passives include Kalan's Edict, which buffs minions. Ossified Essence,
I'll say necromancer and druid seem like the most technical classes, and they both seem great, but if you're a casual player like me, I think it's too much.
Lowest mobility class in the game.
I'd rather just click on something and do damage.
Slower, not faster, while letting you pass through enemies. Because of this, it'll suffer in any content based on speed. But outside of that, the Necro is strong in both the early game and the end game, with the ability to deal both good single target and area damage, deliver good crowd control, and build up tankiness. Onto the Rogue. This is your archer class, but also your agile melee class. If you want to be highly mobile, either keeping enemies at range and peppering them with arrows, or dashing into and out of melee while unleashing rapid flurries of stabs, or some combination of both, the Rogue is for you. Rogues have a variety of ranged and melee skills that let you shoot arrows, throw knives, or just stabby stab.
You got swords
ranged melee and hybrid
arrows.
playstyles are all viable. Rogues have tons of mobility skills to let you zip across a battlefield like no one else. You also have trap skills like caltrops and poison traps, and ninja skills like smoke bombs and stealth. And then rogues also have imbuement skills. You can choose to imbue your weapons with either cold, poison, or shadow damage, each having different effects. Rogues have 3 ultimates, which we'll showcase here. There's Death Trap, which lets you place a trap that does big damage in an area once an enemy moves within range.
That's great.
You got Rain of Arrows, which blasts 2 waves of arrows across the entire screen like it's the movie 300. It's such a cool visual. And then you have Shadow Clone, which creates a shadowy duplicate of yourself that mimics your actions for 15 seconds,
probably not
dealing a fraction of your damage. To support hybrid playstyles, rogues can equip both a ranged weapon, either a bow or crossbow, and 2 one-handed melee weapons. Depending on what skill you use, you'll automatically swap to the correct weapon. But even if you're on a pure bow build, your melee weapons will still be useful as stat sticks. While their damage doesn't contribute to your bow skill damage, the attributes on the items, the affixes, these are always helping you, like a legendary property. The rogue's class mechanic is the...
So you have swords on you, and your swords like have some kind of affix that gives you like plus something to dexterity or whatever. Even if you're not using your swords, you still get that bonus. So like that's good to know, because it was kind of confusing for me to, like, when I was playing it in like the beta, I was like, do I... Because like it seemed like I had to build for one or the other, but I see now you can build for both. For me it's between rogue and sorcerer. I'm thinking
the ability to pick one of 3 specializations. Combo points make your basic skills generate up to 3 combo points, and then your core skills consume combo points for extra effects. In general, the more combo points, the more powerful the effect. So it creates something of a rhythm game where you ideally want to do 3 basic attacks followed by a core attack, or you otherwise work out a cadence that works for you in the right situation. Maybe you know that to finish off this enemy you don't need all 3 combo points, you can stop at 2. This is the most skill-intensive specialization. Then there's Inner Sight. An enemy on your screen will randomly become marked. If you attack a marked enemy, that fills up your Inner Sight gauge. And once your gauge is full, you have unlimited resource for 4 seconds, allowing you to spam skills to your heart's content. If you have a resource-thirsty build, this can be really effective, especially against bosses, since you'll always keep your Inner Sight mark on them. Also really effective for builds that have damage windows. You're going to lay out your max damage when you're in that Inner Sight. Then lastly, there's Preparation. Every 100 resource you spend reduces the cooldown of your ultimate skill by 4 seconds. And using your ultimate resets the cooldowns of your other skills. So if you're using an ultimate and a lot of cooldown skills, this can be a really inviting option. The rogue's resource is called energy.
I don't know.
It generates quickly over time. You start off at 100% and your basic skills don't generate energy by default. Rogues have 5 key passives to choose from. Close quarters combat, which is for hybrid builds, giving you your maximum buff when you're attacking with both ranged and melee skills. Exposure, which is for trap rogues. Momentum, which focuses on getting buffs by either hitting crowd-controlled enemies or by hitting enemies from behind. Mostly for ninja-like rogue builds. You have precision, which
Momentum's ninja-like rogue builds. That one, and then so with that one, maybe you would do like the shadow move, where you have 2 of you guys, and you're just like go around the screen, just like destroying people and stunning and dazing and stuff. Dude, rogue seems good.
which is for ranged rogues.
Rogue is speaking to me. Oh, also, and then ranged also seems good. Both of these, I want both of these, I think. Close quarters is good too, though. I don't like the traps one. I did a traps build with Demon Hunter, and it's fun, but at the end of the day, it's a very kind of passive thing where you're just like putting down traps on the ground and running away from it, which is good. It's good, but it's not very much. It's not as satisfying, I feel like, as like maybe these other more like offensive things. I think I just don't want to go down this route this time because I've already done it with like in Diablo 3.
And then you have Victimize, which specializes in a new mechanic called Vulnerable. Basically, there are ways you can inflict the vulnerable condition upon enemies, and enemies who are vulnerable take, at base, 20% increased damage.
Yeah,
Rogues, more than any other class, can specialize in making enemies vulnerable, dealing more damage to vulnerable enemies, and getting other benefits from making enemies vulnerable.
So it's
Again, for
basically
more information on vulnerable
hits.
and other mechanics, I got my video here. Overall, rogues are an excellent class all around. Their high mobility lets them handle content efficiently, and they can bring big damage. But they can be squishy, and they're generally a class that requires more skill to correctly line up all your damage and not die. And lastly, on to Sorcerer. This is your classic elemental mage.
I'll die.
If you want to be a pure spellcaster, launching different spells at enemies, this is the class for you. The Sorcerer casts cold, fire, and lightning spells.
This one's
You
great.
can throw fireballs or frozen orbs or electrocute enemies with chain lightning. You can protect yourself with fire shields. You can freeze enemies with frost nova. You can cast teleport to travel across the battlefield instantly.
I think I'm going to do a rogue and a sorcerer
Apparently is a
build
lightning
second.
spell. You can summon fire hydras, ice blades, or lightning spears to automatically.
Have any of you guys decided anything as you're watching? Have any of you like kind of any one of these speaking to you more than the other?
Attack enemies while you do other stuff.
Blackstar, I know you're doing barbarian, right? Anybody else?
Like attacking enemies with your other spells, or not dying. You can call down icy blizzards and fiery meteors. You can conjure firewalls and ball lightning. The Sorcerer has 3 ultimates, which we'll showcase here. Deep Freeze turns you into an invulnerable icicle for a few seconds, dealing cold damage in a big area around you and chilling enemies. Very good. Inferno summons a giant fire snake that burns enemies over time. And Unstable Currents supercharges you with lightning, making you randomly trigger other lightning spells whenever you cast a shock spell. The Sorcerer's unique mechanic is the enchantment system. You eventually unlock 2 skill slots that are called enchantment slots. You can put any of your skills in here, as long as you have a skill point in it, and every skill has something special that it does when in an enchantment slot. But basically, enchantment slots are passive. A skill in an enchantment slot will either give you some passive buff, or it'll have a chance to automatically trigger under some condition. A sorcerer's resource is called mana, the classic. Mana generates automatically over time, and the sorcerer's basic attacks do not generate mana by default. The sorcerer has a whopping 6 key passives to choose from, 2 for each element. Avalanche is for lucky hit based cold builds. Again, video and mechanics, blah blah blah. But basically, this passive helps you spam your cold spells faster by removing their resource cost on a certain trigger. Combustion is for damage over time based fire builds. The more you set enemies on fire, the more damage you deal. Esu's Ferocity is for critical strike based fire builds. Overflowing Energy is for cooldown based lightning builds, which helps reduce your cooldowns. Shatter is for cold builds that focus on freezing enemies solid. and Veer's Mastery is for close-range lightning builds. Overall, the Sorcerer is a class that has great mobility thanks to teleport, lots of crowd control powers, and does huge area damage, and is just an all-around really robust class. So, that covers the classes. How strong any given class or build is subject to change as the game gets balance passes, and I expect broken builds to emerge pretty much day one. But as it stands, all classes are able to complete all content in the game, so really, I'd pick the playstyle that you think you'll enjoy the most. After all, you only get to experience a new game for the first time once.
Unless
I'm
you
going to
play Final
start Rogue
Fantasy
for my
VII
campaign
Remake.
playthrough because I just love the Rogue playstyle so much. And then because I need to have a second character for my multiplayer playthrough that I'm going to be doing at the same time, I'm probably going to go Barbarian for that one. But I do plan to play all 5 classes. But I turn the question to you folks, what class are you going to start with in Diablo 4? Sound
Either
off in the
Rogue or
comments.
Sorcerer.
Because that's going to wrap up this.
It's going to either be Rogue or Sorcerer. I'm going to flip a coin, I think, before we start. Yeah, I think that's what we're going to do. Alrighty, guys. Cool. Well, I'm going to be back on probably maybe an hour before maybe it goes live, I think, but I'm going to go, do some jumping jacks, eat some healthy food, get my snacks ready to go. I do got some vanilla ice cream and M&Ms that I'm gonna put into a bowl and eat while I'm playing this game. I also got some Dr. Pepper, and I think I need to go buy some more Cool Ranch Doritos. That's definitely top priority until for when the game comes out. But yeah, I'll probably